First is the creation of the Williamsburg Tourism Zone, proposed ordinance 16-19.
And Michelle DeWitt, our Economic Development Director, will lead that discussion.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. Good to be here today. Carolyn set the stage nicely, and then Council in its discussion continued it nicely about the Northeast Triangle. This is another one of our proposals to encourage private investment in that area and more activity and more vibrancy. And as Carolyn said, this fits in with the city's goals and the past biennial goals. And as Mr. Pond said, we've been talking about it for quite a while. And it's a three-pronged effort. One is Public Works looking into streetscapes improvements and the built environment improvement there. Secondly, the zoning that you've already discussed. And then thirdly, how do economic incentives attract the private market to invest and attract customers there? And that's the part I'll be talking about today. And the Williamsburg Tourism Zone is what's on the table. Here is a map of the zone. So this looks a little bit different than Carolyn's map on the zoning district. The zoning district was just on Capitol Landing Road. This tourism zone includes the entire area we call the Northeast Triangle. So bounded by, I don't know if, Queens Creek up here at the north, York County on the west. The Visitor Center, Culinary Williamsburg Visitor Center is part of this Northeast Triangle. On the south, it's the CSX railroad tracks. And then on the east, it's York County and James City County a little bit here. So, or no, it's all York County, sorry, on that side. So it's this entire area that we're talking about tourism zone proposal. So what is a tourism zone? It's a way to increase investment or try to encourage more private investment in the Northeast Triangle. It's one of the tools that the state allows cities to do is to create tourism zones. Where we can offer local tax incentives to encourage certain targeted businesses to come to this area of the city. It also gives us access to the state incentive program around tourism zones. And we've talked conceptually about this before, but there is state gap financing money on the table that can happen through a tourism zone if a game-changing project comes to the city. So this will set the stage for that as well. So what businesses, I mentioned it's a way to target certain businesses to come to an area of the city. So what we're talking about in a tourism zone is businesses whose customers reside outside of the local area. So it's not you and me and our audience who lives here going out to eat and shop. This is people coming from out of town to spend their money. Hence tourism and hospitality. And so the uses we've identified will look very familiar to you based on your earlier work today. Our culinary and hospitality uses, and these match the zoning district that you just approved. So it's the hotels, motels, timeshares, theaters, bake shops, restaurants, museums, micro beverage, culinary schools, retail, and art studios and workshops. So again, things that are attracting customers from outside the area, making this area a destination where people want to spend time, have fun, and spend money. All commercial uses is another thing to point out here. There is some residential area in this zone, but these incentives are targeted just to the commercial business uses. We've The issue of chain and franchise businesses is a common discussion, particularly in the tourism world. And so what this ordinance says is that if you're a franchise or a chain that's not currently in the Greater Williamsburg Area, which is defined as James City County, the City of Williamsburg, and Bruton portion of York County, if you're the first one coming in and you're a brand or a franchise, you're eligible for our incentives. But if you're already in the district and you're a national franchise or brand, then we're not offering our local incentives. We also we added some language into the ordinance that makes it clear this would not prohibit a locally owned business from opening a second location in the tourism zone. So somebody who already has a business here but is not a chain or a franchise, is a locally owned or locally created business without that franchise, is welcome to partake of these incentives. There are some minimum investment criteria And these are capital investments, so these are investments made on fixed assets for the long term for a business's success and efficiency and profitability. They're not working capital or day-to-day operations. And we have a definition in the ordinance that explains capital investment. The minimum requirement would be for a new business coming into the area would be $250,000, and an existing business would need to invest $50,000 to be eligible for the program. There's some other scoring criteria to determine the range of incentives that a business would be eligible for, and those are around the sales that the business projects and the local tax generation, our return on investment that will come off of those sales, job creation, public art contribution, live performing arts or art for sale in the building, healthy foods or pedestrian-friendly designs that exceed the city requirements. These are all elements of City Council's goals and initiatives and the city's initiatives. And so it's a sliding scale. Each business will be scored depending on how their application meets these goals. So what are the local incentives? Much like when we've done this with other incentive programs, we're maintaining all existing tax revenue. So we're not giving up any existing tax revenue. This is offering a refund of new tax revenue that comes into the city because of these incentives. So it refunds a portion of that future new tax revenue around your business license tax, BPOL, the 1% local portion of sales tax, and the 5% room and meals taxes. It also offers a zoning and building fee waiver. These are common incentives because these are taxes and regulatory issues that the locality controls, so we can offer these as refunds in these districts. And I'm going to go through some scenarios about how that plays out in a real-world application. So the time frame that we have in the ordinance is that it's a maximum of 5 years that a business could get these incentives. And as I mentioned before, there's those scoring criteria that relate to the city's goals that will impact the time and the percentage of refund that is given. And this is an overview of that. You see that all the incentives are heavier at year one and then decline over time. The percentages are the same. So for BPOL, sales, room, and meal tax, you can see in year one, depending on how a business scores, it could receive 30 to 100% of those taxes back as a refund. Year two, 20 to 80%. Year three, 10 to 60. Year four, 0 to 40. And year five, 0 to 20. Again, I think this will make sense when we go through some examples. So here's an example. We have a new restaurant that comes to the tourism zone, invests $80,000 in capital investment, creates 20 jobs, has healthy, locally sourced food on the menu. And again, these are all things that affect the scoring criteria for the business. They're projecting $1 million in annual sales in year one and $1.5 million in annual sales in years 2 through 5. So what we've done is plug that into the formulas that I went over on the slide before. And in this case, the business receives 3 years worth of incentives. And you can see that in year one, it's $37,200 is refunded to the business. The net new city revenue is $24,800, and you take that over the 5-year period, you see that the business, $93,000 is refunded to the business, and $341,000 is the net new taxes or return on investment received by the city. One thing that's really cool about these incentives, the BPOL tax is a tax that the business pays, so they pay that tax and it will be refunded. The other 3 taxes are taxes that the customers pay. The sales tax, the meals tax, and the room tax. So that's an added boon to the business. It's not something they paid and it's given back. It's something their customers actually paid and is given back to them. We did review these with people in the industries, and they agreed that the incentives we're offering are enough to move the needle for someone to take a second look and really consider coming to this location. I have 2 more examples, bear with me. We have an expansion of an existing restaurant, so I wanted to talk about how an existing business could also use use these incentives. You'll remember that in order to qualify, an existing business has to invest at least $50,000 of capital investment. So in this scenario, they're doing a $100,000 capital investment, renovation or expansion, 8 new jobs, healthy food, contribution to public art, and live music. So these are, again, the things we want to see in this area of the city. They're projecting new sales, so they probably expanded and have quite a few more tables and kitchen capacity, or maybe they're opening up for another meal. Maybe they've only been open for lunch and breakfast, and now they're opening up for dinner. They're projecting $750,000 in new annual sales in year 1 and $1 million in new annual sales in years 2 through 5. And you can see under this scenario, the business actually qualifies for 5 years worth of incentives. And so we have, again, the net new revenue to the city, $124,000 over 5 years. The business is refunded $170,500. So you can see that on an increased sales of $1 million, that's enough to attract attention for people to look at investing here. Lastly, we talked about a pretty big investment, a new hotel with a restaurant, investing $11 million, 25 new jobs, pedestrian friendly. This scored as high as you could score on the criteria that we're proposing. And they're saying $2.3 million in sales year 1, $3 million in years 2 through 5. And you can see that they qualify for 5 years, as I mentioned, starting at 100%, going to 80, 60, 40, 20% over time for a total of a little over $500,000 of tax refund from the city. And the city's still netting $371,000. Another thing to remember is in year 6, the city starts to net the entire 100%, which is how economic incentives are designed. So next steps with the tourism zone, and I think someone earlier said we learned from having done other zones. We've done an incentive district in the arts district in the city. Excuse me. So staff really talked about what went well and what was missing in that effort. And one thing was professional targeted marketing. So City Council was kind enough to appropriate $10,000 to the EDA above their standard allocation each year for them to use for new business recruitment. So staff is suggesting that money be used to do professional targeted marketing to get culinary arts and hospitality investment into this district. I mentioned in the beginning it's packaged with zoning infrastructure plans and a small business investment grant, which you'll be hearing about more next month, as a whole package to increase attention and shine the light for private investment to come to this area of the city. We'll also, as we do with all programs, monitor investment, excuse me, vacancy rate, use mix, available property, what's the impact of this project, and report back to the City Council and EDA over time. That's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just had a couple. So you said that projected sales, but it would actually be based on the actual sales.
Yes, ma'am.
And as far as an expansion, so what happens during the construction period, or if they're still operating, or
Sure.
How do you sort of measure that?
Good question. So we actually have written into the ordinance that the business can pick what its first year is. So another thing that may happen is not only will they be under construction and renovation during part of the year, but they may do that well within a calendar year, and so their tax payments. Excuse me. Get my water. So let's say they open in November. That calendar year worth of tax payments they make is pretty small, so we've given them that they can choose the next full calendar year as their first year of incentives, and that's very typical in economic development programs. It's also how we do it in the arts district as well. But to answer your question, we would start calculating the new taxes from when they open after the renovation. So let's say it's an existing business that currently offers lunch and breakfast and wants to expand and offer dinner, it would happen after all those construction activities were done. The service staff was hired and the dinner menu actually came online. But then secondarily, they could say, let's say that happens in November, they could say, well, we want to wait till the next full calendar year.
Okay. But otherwise, I think it's another example of excellent work by staff putting together tools to really revitalize the area. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, Michelle. I won't make you talk that much, but this is something that really complements the discussion that we just had. And again, all driven to find ways, tools to stimulate new businesses, to help encourage existing business to reinvest in themselves. Again, to be a destination where people who with money in their wallets want to go spend it. And that's kind of been the discussion about the Northeast Triangle and Capitol Landing Road, 2nd Street, for some years now. And so having these incentive packages available to entrepreneurs is exactly what I think the city ought to be doing. And I think the point that Ms. DeWitt makes about, the incentive is on net new dollars being spent. It's not on what a business already calculates. So it's not going to cost the city initially, and hopefully if it works out well, the city and the residents will do very well by this. And so our toolbox of economic incentive just got bigger. It's on wheels now, and so I think we've got some real momentum here, so thank you.
A comment and then a couple questions. First, excellent work, and I really commend you and staff for putting up such a creative and comprehensive plan with the tourism zone. I think it's exciting because it falls in line, one, with the GIO's stated policy goals and also with the economic development strategic goals outlined from past councils, and now it's carried towards the present council. I think it's going to be beneficial because this tool will be able to guide what we really want to see in that area as we revitalize that area and promote the Culinary Arts District. But also I think it makes us more competitive too because of all these attractive incentives to want to bring these businesses into the area. So the scenarios you gave were solid, and I'm really excited to see where this takes us in the next coming months, years, whatever the period is. Just a couple questions. From what I understand, when I was looking into Newport News tourism zones in the prior internship before council, they developed a marketing plan. And I'm not sure about the timeline in terms of whether they did it along the way as a work in progress or if they had it before they established and passed it to council. Is this something that you and staff are looking to do and kind of see how the Culinary Arts District kind of develops in a certain amount of time?
Yes, great question and good point. We definitely do need a targeted marketing strategy and a professional plan and collateral to make this effective. We all may know about it, but we need people who want to invest and build culinary arts and hospitality businesses in this area to know about it. So there is a $10,000 appropriation to the EDA.
Okay.
That was made specifically to recruit new businesses. Mm-hmm. So we plan to use that if this is approved by City Council today to move forward to do a professional marketing.
Perfect. Also, in terms of just kind of seeing, because this is all brand new, this is one part of three package, a package deal, or it's the big toolboxes, Doug Pons has said. Is there going to be a re-evaluation period? Because I'm looking at the additional scoring criteria. I think there is a lot of potential to develop that as well, maybe provide additional scoring criteria or maybe take out some that might not work out. And I had two points to that. I serve on the board with the Greater Peninsula Workforce Consortium, and we are having these conversations, very relevant discussions of how to develop workforce development in this peninsula region. And one of the biggest problems in these workforce development programs is trying to get employers to the table. So if there is a way, if there is a reevaluation period where we can see, maybe we want to add, this criteria to promote greater workforce development. Maybe an employer may want to be incentivized to send workers to workforce programs, training programs per se. And even the simplest, I guess, is SWAM certification, small women and minority-owned businesses. I think that's a big, important part of developing the creative economy that your memo outlines as well. So is there going to be a time period for evaluating?
Certainly. We as I mentioned, we will look at the return on investment and report back to City Council and the EDA about what's happening. And there certainly are opportunities to update the ordinance, but there's also opportunities to add those goals to the criteria for scoring without even updating the ordinance under council's wishes. So with workforce, as you know, on the peninsula, they often will pay 75% of a employee's wage while they're going through training and pay 75% of the training, but the employer still has to come up with the other 25%. So there's certainly areas the city could look in to step in and enhance what's already offered by our partners. So Marvin may want to mention a timeline if we would do that in 6 months or a year.
I think staff was talking around a 6 month, enough time to get it implemented, get the marketing plan out, and then evaluate the effectiveness of the marketing plan initially and see if we need to make any movements at that time. This is one stick in a bundle of economic development programs that are available from the federal, state, and local government. So this just makes us flexible to achieve the GIO visions of council. It's the tourism zone by itself may not be completely effective, but with land use through the culinary arts, with a public investment, as the mayor mentioned, in the streetscape and public infrastructure. Staff also considered in looking at this area, is there workforce available in this area? And the Merrimack Trail multi-use zoning area provides a ready workforce nearby if new jobs are created that would be walkable to this area. So this also enhances quality of life for different economic classes within the city and provides an opportunity to create that next generation of place within the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeWitt.
Sure.
You're not done yet. And I'll ask the first question of the city attorney just so you don't have to answer it. Although I know you would certainly be capable. This tourism zone is an overlay on the existing zoning, whether it's B4 or RS2, RS3.
It's not zoning. It's a separate independent thing from the zoning ordinance.
Right, so nothing about it supersedes the current zoning of a
No.
property. So if there is residential property that happens to be contained within the tourism zone has no real effect on that piece of property.
The only individuals who can take advantage of the tourism zone are those that are specified in the tourism zone ordinance. So residential would not be an entity that could take advantage of that.
I just want to make sure people are clear and understand that. Ms. Ramsey touched on a question related to the scoring criteria with the forecasted additional revenue and the real rebate or return of tax payment is based on the actual revenue, not the forecasted revenue, but the scoring of the application is based on the forecasted revenue. So what do we have in place to, nobody knows, but to the best of our ability, verify that the forecast is at least reasonable?
So everything is verified through our finance department and our Commissioner of the Revenue's office because the taxes are paid after during the calendar year, but everything is calculated after the calendar year. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but the business.
You have a mechanism to do this?
Yes, we have a mechanism to do this.
And I think one of the most important things here, and Mr. Waite, you touched on it. We're going to add some great tools here. We're going to put in. We've put in some zoning. We may allow food trucks. I think we probably will. We're considering creating this tourism zone. We're going to make infrastructure improvements. We're anxiously awaiting to hear about the Small Business Investment Grant Program. And we could do all this, and if nobody knows about it, it doesn't make any difference. So getting the word out to the right people in the right market segments is going to be critical to the success of this. There's some real money involved in these incentives, but they alone are not going to inspire, I don't think, inspire somebody to come up with an idea and say, I have to create a business today to get into this tourism zone. These are about people who are already in the planning stages or considering where they're going to locate or relocate their business, and it makes this area that much more attractive by the return they can get on that investment. And as everybody has said here, I think the work that's been done in the background is terrific. Take some time to see how well it works, but I'm looking forward to answering that question. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council adopt Ordinance -1619 to create the Williamsburg Tourism Zone.
Second.
Ms. Walton?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Motion passes.